Masechet Ketubot, Daf Samech Bet. Today we have the famous series of stories of husbands who go away from their wives for extended periods of time to learn Torah. And so how long can someone go away to study Torah with or without the permission of his wife? So we begin Hatamidim Yosim LeTalmud. So we're discussing the Mishnah that started with the Machloket Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai about the standard Onah. Is it 1 week or 2 weeks in the context of if a man makes a vow not to be with his wife, so then he'd have to divorce her with a ketubah. Well, how long can he make such a vow? Bet Hillel says only 1 week because the standard onah would be 1 week. We'll see that for a Talmid Chacham also the standard onah is 1 week. But then it went on that said if a student does want to go and learn Torah for a longer period of time, he may go even without the permission of his wife for 30 days. So if he's home, then he would have to be he would have to fulfill onah each week, but if he's away, he's permitted to study Torah for 30 days. So the Gemara begins, says, B'rshut kama. What if they have permission? The Mishnah said if they don't have permission, they're only 30 days. How about with permission? How long can they go for? Now, before we answer it, the Gemara asks itself a question. Kama deba'eh. What do you mean? What kind of question is that? If you have permission, you can go as long as you want. As long as the husband and wife agree, then they can do whatever they want. They can agree on any amount. If she's agreeable, then she's not going to demand a divorce. So, what are you asking exactly? Orcha de milta kama. We're asking is, what's the usual amount? What would be a normal, acceptable amount? Sometimes a husband can put pressure on his wife, let me go longer, and that would be above the average, above what everyone else is doing. So that would be like undue pressure. But so we're asking is, what would be a reasonable amount that he should ask and he should expect her to say okay? Amar Rav Chodesh kan v'chodesh b'bayit shenemar l'chol devar hamachlekot haba'a v'yoset chodesh b'chodesh l'chol chodshei hashana. Rav says 1 month here at home and 1 month away. 1 month there, study kan meaning in the Bet Midrash, and 1 month at home. So he should alternate every other month, be away from his wife, and the other month at home, which is consistent with the Mishnah says he can go away without permission for 1 month only, but if he's going to go for longer than that, then he can. He just has to alternate, and he can go many months as long as he's home for a month in between. And how does he know that? From Divrei Yamim, we're talking about King David's army reserve units. People would serve in them for 1 month for all the months of the year. Now, in the simple reading of this is that it's talking about 1 month out of the year. Like today, in modern Israelis have reserve duty 1 month out of the year. So too in King David's army, they had to go and serve for 1 month out of the year. But Rav is interpreting it as chodesh be-chodesh, every other month. So 6 months altogether, alternating during the year. That's Rav. Rabbi Yochanan says a little bit less. He can stay for 1 month here in the Bet Midrash and 2 months at home, so only 1/3 of the time in the Bet Midrash should be and only 4 months out of the year. Shenemar chodesh yiyu balebanon shenaim chodashim bebeto. We learned this from Sefer Melachim regarding King Shlomo when he was building the Bet HaMikdash. He would have construction workers, Israelites, that would go for 1 month up to Lebanon to go cut down the trees there and prepare them, and then they would go home for 2 months. So both of these, they're both doing important work, and nevertheless, they have to go home for a certain amount of time. So these are the two models. Now, Rav Nameh, how come Rav didn't learn from the Bet HaMikdash example and say you have to be home for 2 months? For that, there was less pressure. Since there's a lot other people can go and involve themselves in working to construct the Bet HaMikdash. You didn't need everybody. So then there was more time that they could stay home. But regarding learning Torah, where everybody all have to go and learn Torah. Everybody has an obligation. So then there's more pressure, so they can go away for longer. Rabbi Yochanan, how come Rabbi Yochanan did not learn the source about King David's army, that they can go away for more often, every other month? And the answer is King David paid the people that came to serve in the army, and therefore the wives were more willing to let them go. They said, okay, you're going to go, you're going to bring home a salary, provide for the family, okay, you can go every other month. Whereas those going to learn Torah are not getting monetary profit, only spiritual profit. And so therefore the wives are not going to let them go for that for every other month, but would want them to stay home every 2 months. So he felt that the source from King David was not as good a source, and he preferred the one about King Shlomo, so that they can go away less often. All right, Amar Rav, Anacha shoberet chasi gufo shel adam. This is not related to the same issue, but rather is another machloket between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan about interpretation of Pesukim. So Rav says that groaning, when someone is depressed, that is sad, and groans because of it, that breaks half of the person's body. I guess they kind of double over in pain. Shenemar v'ata ben adam he'anach b'shibron motnaim u'b'mirot te'anach. This is Yechezkel. Hashem told Yechezkel, go and with the breaking of your loins groan bitterly. He told him to go and act as if he's groaning, and double over his loins. So that's the middle of his body. So that's half of one's body. When someone is groaning out of pain or depression, then it breaks his entire body. Kol yadayim v'chihata kol ruach v'kol berkayim telachna mayim. This is the very next pasuk after the one before. So after Yechezkel was told that he should groan and bend over at the loins, so the point is that he should do this public demonstration, and everybody will see him. And they'll say, why are you doing that? And he will answer, Yechezkel will answer, because of the terrible news that is coming. And when this news comes, talking about the news of the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, every heart will melt, all hands will be slack, every spirit shall be faint, all knees shall drip with water. Which means that when the people hear about the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, their entire bodies are going to break. And so here we have we see that Rav is quoting the first pasuk where Yechezkel himself, only half of his body is breaking when he's demonstrating, whereas Rabbi Yochanan says a entire body breaks, and this is when Yechezkel describes to the people that what their reaction is going to be when they hear about the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. So, which is the whole body. Okay, now Rabbi Yochanan, what is Rabbi Yochanan going to do with the first pasuk that says only at the loins, at the hips, only half the body? And Rav also, how is he going to interpret this pasuk that says the entire body of the people will be broken? So, Shane Shemua de Bet HaMikdash de takifa tuba. So when we're talking about the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, then that is very strong, very crushing, and that's why in that second pasuk, their entire body will be crushed. Now the truth is, Yechezkel also is actually the model. He's also talking about the destruction of Bet HaMikdash. Tosafot and ask the question and say that it's not the same. Where he is only demonstrating so that people will ask him, but he's not actually reacting to the Bet HaMikdash was not destroyed yet. He's just acting the way people will act. So that's not as bad when you're just projecting for the future than when it actually happens. Whereas in the second pasuk, he's describing how the people will actually act when they hear the destruction of Bet HaMikdash, which is that their entire body is going to be destroyed. So in truth, there's no contradiction between these two pasukim. It really just depends on how terrible something is. If it's something that's so bad, like the destruction of Bet HaMikdash, and it's right after someone hears it, then their entire body will be crushed. Whereas if it's either something that's not as bad as that, or it's just something that you're predicting will happen in the future, the anguish at those points is only half the body. They had a Jew and a non-Jew walking together. And the non-Jew couldn't keep up. The Jew was walking much faster and stronger. So the non-Jew wanted to slow the Jew down. Remember your Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, and that way he'll groan and sigh and his body will break. So he hopefully will slow down. Nigid ve'itenach. And in fact, the Jew sighed and groaned. But he still kept walking fast, and the non-Jew still could not keep up with him. So a non-Jew, he was apparently learned, and he knew this halacha, he knew this tradition that when groans, that breaks half the body. He followed Rav, this non-Jew. He breaks half the body, so your body should be broken, you should be going slower, weaker. No, that only applies to new news. When the Bet HaMikdash was just destroyed, or someone hears some tragedy that just happened, but this is something that happened a long time ago. So yes, while we are still sad and we still mourn and still sigh, but it's not with the same intensity as it was when we first heard it. There's a common folk saying that says someone who's used to being bereaved, if a woman bar minan loses many children, then she does not panic. She is not as anguished for the second, third child as she is from the first. She is already used to that kind of pain, and so this that explains why he was able to still walk fast, even though he was sighing for the Bet HaMikdash. All right, back to the topic. Hatayalin bechol yom. People of leisure, they have their onas. They have to be with their wives every day. My tayalin. What does this word mean? Amarava bene pirkeh. These are the students that go to the lectures on a regular basis. Pirkeh is a plural of pirka, same as perik. It means a section. So that would be a section of text, which is equivalent to the English lecture, which comes from a lectionary, a certain reading. So these pirka were the public addresses, lectures that the rabbis would give. And so these are people that go and study Torah on a regular basis. That is what the tayalim are, according to Rava. Amar le Abaye, man dichti behu shav lachem mashkime kum acharei shebet ochale lechem asabim ken yiten li dido shena ve'amar Rabbi Yitzchak. אלו נשותיהם של תלמידי חכמים שמנדדות שינה מעיניהם בעולם הזה ובאות אחרי העולם הבא. ואת אמרת בני פרקה. Abba is going to ask that Bnei Pirkei, they're studying Torah. This is very intensive work. They're going to be up early, stay late at night. They're not going to have the time and the strength to be with their wives every night. Can't be talking about sages that are studying every day. How does he know that they have no time for this? Because the pasuk in Mishleh, the peshat of the pasuk is those who go to work and wake up early and come back late and eat the bread of toil, they do that for naught. Because they're putting in extra hours, but ultimately it's up to God what a person will achieve, and therefore God gives His beloved sleep. Okay, so that's the simple reading of it. But here we're reading it as those who wake up early and go to sleep late are Talmidei Chachamim. And the word shav here must mean something like it should be, don't worry about it, right? It should not be a big deal in your eyes for a sage to wake up early and go to sleep late, even though they are going to be tortured in this world, because in the next world, God will give them sleep. So it's good to wake up early, stay up late in this world, learning Torah for the next world. Now, lidido for his friends is referring not to the sage himself, but to his wife. The wife would wake up early and tend to him, and stay up late and make the dinner and make sure that the husband had everything he needed. So therefore, she is the Yedid, and she also, because she is staying up, waking up early and going to sleep late and having little sleep to support her husband learning Torah, she too will achieve Olam Haba, will achieve rest in Olam Haba. Okay, now the main thing here is not the wife, but rather the husband, since he is going out and studying so long, so they don't have enough strength or hours to perform Onah every night. So Abaye says, Rava, what are you talking about? You say that people who go and study and attend the lectures every day, they don't, that's not it. Ela amar Abaye kederavda, marav kegon ravu Shemuel bar Shelat, achil medide, veshate medide, vegane betula de apadne, velachalif peristaka de malka ababe. So Abaye, rather, Abaye explains, it is talking about a certain type of sage, or a person, any person who is like Shemuel, Rabbi Shemuel bar Shelat. There's a couple of interpretations. As the simple reading seems to me, he was a person of means, and he's able to eat of his own and drink of his own and sleep in his own house. He didn't have to work for a living. But it was not apparent he was a man of means. He was very modest, and so he had enough to live without having to work, and he didn't spend a lot, and so he didn't have to deal with the taxes and the government, and so he was a man of leisure. So anyone like that would be fine. Now he himself was a sage, so maybe he was he spent too many hours at work. So we're not talking about him specifically, but anyone like him who is not learning Torah so much and has leisure, has time and leisure, he would have to perform Onah every day. So that's what Abaye is saying is refers to. Others say that he was a school teacher. He was a rabbi, but he was a school teacher, and kids, you only teach them from during the daytime hours, not early in the morning, not late at night. And so, he made a small sum, a salary, but that was enough. He lived modestly. That's why the tax collectors left him alone. And so either way, the point is that he is a person who has time and resources, and therefore that's the kind of person we're talking about that should perform Onah every day. Ki ata Ravin amar kegon mefanneke demarav Ravin, who came from Eretz Yisrael, said, is talking about the pampered people in Israel. They're people who are very rich, and they eat very well, and they rest well, and so therefore they have great strength and can perform Onah every day. All right. Rabbi Abu Hava Ka'e Be Baneh. Now we're going to see a couple of stories that show the great strength of these wealthy people in Eretz Yisrael. So Rabbi Abu was once standing in the bathhouse, and he was being supported by two servants. It would seem like Rabbi Abu was older and weaker if he has to be supported by two servants. But here's a surprise. The floor of the bathhouse collapsed under him. So here we're talking about a bathhouse like one that we found at Masada. You may have been there and seen it, but it was the same Roman bath that you find in lots of places. The construction is that they have under the floor, they would have pillars holding up the floor, and the reason for this is that there would be very hot water flowing through this area under the floor, and that very hot water would heat up the the floor of the bathhouse, so that when people step, they would step on a nice warm floor, and then that would also, they would put a little water on the top, on the floor above it, and then it would turn into steam, so you'd have a nice steam bath. Okay, so you can see how if it was not built so well, or over time, one of these tiles can crack, and a person would fall down, which actually would be quite dangerous because there was burning hot water underneath. So that is what happened. But Rabbi Abhu was able to find a pillar, and he stood on the pillar, and he got out, and the two servants that were holding him up, Rabbi Abhu was able to pull them. He's holding on to a pillar with one hand, pulling them up with the other hand, balancing on top of the pillar, getting them off. So he had great strength. He's able to do this. So you see that Rabbi Abhu, he was one of these great, wealthy, well-fed people, and so that's why he had such great strength. Rabbi Yochanan Avaka Sadik Bedarga, or a similar story. Rabbi Yochanan, famous Rabbi Yochanan, who was going up the stairs, and and he was holding on, being supported by two of his students. And one of the stairs collapsed under him. But he went up and he pulled them both with him. He was able to get to the next step, pull the servants, and so that his students, so that they didn't fall. What if Rabbi Yochanan is so strong, why did he need the two others to support him? Amar lehu ki im ken maniach letzikna. Rabbi Yochanan said, if I use my own strength, then what will I leave over for my old age? In other words, like a battery, person has a certain amount of strength, and so yes, he is very strong, but if he uses it all up, then he will become weak when he's old. So therefore, he would lean on his two students in order to save up his strength so he could live longer. But in an emergency, he was able to draw on that strength and save himself and save his two students. Okay, so this is these are examples of Rabbi Abhu and Rabbi Yochanan, who were the well-fed people of Jerusalem, of Israel, and they themselves, again, might not be the examples of Onah every day because they were Talmidei Chachamim. So presumably they would be studying Torah for many, many hours. But the point is, though others who are not studying Torah or early in the morning and late at night, but are pampered and have strength, would be responsible for Onah every day. Ha'pa'alim p'shetayim b'Shabbat. Okay, now the Mishnah goes on and says that for regular workers, they have to perform Onah twice a week. Hold on, we have a contradiction from a Baraita that says regular workers only once a week. It depends. If they are doing work in their own city, well then that means they're coming home every night. So they're around, they're available, so therefore twice a week. Whereas the Baraita is talking about where they're going to a different city to do work. And so they have a lot of travel time, and maybe they're staying overnight over there so that they can save on the commuting, so they're not available, they don't have as much time, and therefore only once a week. This answer that was given by Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Chanina is also explicit in a Baraita. When the Mishnah says, this is a Tosefta commenting on the Mishnah, when the Mishnah says twice a week, what case is that talking about? That's only if they're in their city. But if their construction site is in this different city, then only once a week. Hachamarim achat beShabbat. Donkey drivers, Mishnah said, is once a week because they go on short trips for a couple of days at a time, since they're just driving donkeys. So, but they're not home every day during the week. So now his question is, as follows. Since the Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, Bet Hillel was talking about someone who is regularly supposed to do onah more than once a week. That's why he said if someone makes a vow and says will not be with his wife, he will not be with his wife for 1 week, he has to divorce her. So Bet Hillel's law would actually only apply to those who have an onah more than once a week, which would be tayalim every day and pa'alim twice a week. Whereas Hamarim, their onah is once a week anyway, and Gemalim and Sapanim are even more. So Bet Hillel's law would not apply to them. So that's our question. Why doesn't How come in the beginning here it doesn't say that if someone is a tayal or a day laborer, then the maximum vow he can do is up to a week, but not more? It doesn't say anything about that. So the way he's expressing it is, does the Tana of our Mishnah bother to tell us this law or only regarding tayal poel, and it only applies to them? How come he doesn't say so explicitly that Bet Hillel is only applying to those who usually have an onah more than once a week? Amar le la akulehu. So he responded. Abaye responded. Actually, it is referring to all of them, everyone all people, all types of workers. Hold on. A sailor, he only has to do onah once every 6 months. So if he would make a vow and say, "I'm not going to be with my wife for 1 week, for 8 days, 1 week or longer," so what would be the problem? He doesn't have to be home more than once every 6 months anyway. He doesn't have to be with his wife. And the answer is, it's actually psychological. The saying is, let's say if two people fasting, and so both of them are fasting equally, but one has a basket full of bread so that he knows as soon as his fast is over, he has bread there to eat. So he will have an easier time fasting. Whereas a person who is fasting just the same amount of time, but he also has no bread with him. And so even when the fast is over, he's going to have to go and find and look and get some bread. So then psychologically, his fast is harder. Same thing here. Even though this wife, her husband, does not need to come home if he's going on a long trip once every 6 months, nevertheless, if there's no vow, then she says, well, maybe he'll come home early. Maybe he'll come home today. Maybe he'll come home right in a few days. And so psychologically, she knows it's possible that she will be with her husband at any point, so then she'll be able to wait. Whereas if he comes and makes a vow and says, I vow I'm not going to be with you for 1 week or 2 weeks, then psychologically that's like having an empty basket. Even if he does come home, they're prohibited. So even a sailor is not the halacha Bet Hillel applies to everyone. Even a sailor is not allowed. He is allowed to go away for work, but he cannot make a vow that he will not be with his wife for a week or more. What if someone is a donkey driver? When they were married, okay, so she knows he's going to be a donkey driver. He's not going to be home every night, but she's expecting once a week, and now he wants to change professions. He wants to become a camel driver, and now he's not going to be home more than once he doesn't have to be home more than once every 30 days. So she is going to have onah less often. Is that permitted? Can he do that without her permission? Abaye's answer is no, it's not allowed, because a woman would prefer only 1 kav, a small amount of flour, a small amount of salary, and food, and tiflut, and have conjugal relations, then have 10 kabin and be richer. Even changing professions is going to bring in a bigger salary, but it will mean perishut, that she'll have to be abstinent because her husband will be away. She'd rather not have that, right? Women are going to be less materialistic and more desirous to be with their husbands. Hasapanim, ahad shisha chodashim divrei Rabbi Eliezer. So we mentioned that sailors was once a month. Actually, the entire Mishnah says at the end, Dibre Rabbi Eliezer. We're understanding that now to mean that this is going on the entire section, everything, all the different types of professions in the Mishnah are the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Amar Rabbeinu Amar Rav halacha Rabbi Eliezer. Rav says that is the halacha we follow this Mishnah. Amar Rav Ada bar Hava Amar Rav Zodi bre Rabbi Eliezer. Rachamim omrim atamidim yosim latamut Torah shetayim v'shalosh shanim shelo b'reshut. So regarding the sages specifically, whereas Rabbi Eliezer says they can go away and study for 30 days. But Rav says that's only the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Hachamim disagreed, and the halacha would follow them that a sage can go away for 2 or 3 years, even without the permission of his wife, and go and study Torah. Amar Rava, Samchu Rabbanan ad Rav Ada bar Hava, v'Abdei Obada ben Afshayhu. So Rava said that there are many sages who followed the opinion of Rav Ada bar Hava, who says that the Mishnah regarding 30 days is only opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, but Chachamim allow for 2 and 3 years, and they performed this action themselves. In other words, not only did they say the halachas you can do 2 or 3 years, but they even practiced what they preached, and they went away. The word ben Avshayu has a double meaning, because it could also mean v'abdei obada, they did an act with their lives, with their nefesh. In other words, they endangered and sometimes even gave up their lives because they went away for 2 or 3 years. Why? How did that happen? Okay, the next 2 couple of stories will demonstrate. Rav Rechume would study with Rava in Mechoza, where Rava lived. He came home once a year, which is actually well within the permitted bounds of 2 or 3 years. So he came home, even more than he had to. But it's a funny day to come home. Yom Kippur, they can't be together anyway. But anyway, he came before Yom Kippur. He would have Suda Mafseket with his family, and he would be with his wife and perform Onah once a year, before Kippur, after Kippur, and then he'd go back and go to study. Yom Ahad meshachteh shemata. But 1 year on Erev Yom Kippur, he was engrossed in studying, and his studying pulled him, and he forgot to come home. Hava mesachya debitu. Meanwhile, we shift cameras back home, and his wife was expecting him. Hashta'ate, and she was saying, he's coming now, right? I'm sure any second now he will be home. She's looking out the window waiting for him. La'ata, but he never came. She became depressed, and a tear fell from her eye. We pan back to the rabbi studying. Havayati be'igra. He was sitting on the roof. I guess it was nice out, and he was studying Torah on the roof. Ifchit igra mitute v'nach nafsheh. And the roof collapsed under him, and he died. A kind of midah keneged midah, because he forgot to come home. A tear fell from her eye, so he fell from the roof. So point is that even though technically he was allowed to come home every 2 or 3 years, even without permission, but he set up an expectation that he's coming home once a year, every Erev Yom Kippur, and he fell short of that expectation. And so therefore, even if the letter of the law, technically he was permitted to, but there's also the spirit of the law, there's also human feelings, and he did not fulfill. Okay, the Meshachteh is like pulling on him, as if he's with another, as if the Torah he desires the Torah, in this case, as more than his wife. And so you see that even though there were sages that did it and followed this halacha, so technically it was allowed, but they did so with their lives. Rav Rechume lost his life because of it. Okay, now we interrupt to the series. We have a series of 7 stories, but we interrupt it with one more halacha. Onah shel tamidei chamim emat. What is the standard onah for a sage? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel me'erev Shabbat la'erev Shabbat, every Friday night, because it says Asher pidyo yiten be'ito. Amar Rav Yehuda v'item Rav Huna v'item Rav Nachman zeh meshemesh mitato me'erev Shabbat la'erev Shabbat. in Tehillim 1, when it says that brings forth its fruit in its season, be'ito, at the time, meaning when, what does that mean? So these sages say this refers to someone who has relations every Friday night, that it will bear fruit, they'll have children, they'll have success. Okay, so this is the standard if the husband is home, if the sage is home. If he goes away, well, then it wouldn't be once a week, but how long is a question, right, as that we saw different opinions. Okay, now we're ready with that background to see story number 2. Yehuda b'det Rabbi Chaya Hatane Rabbi Yanai Hava Azel Vite Bebe Rav. So Yehuda was the son of Rabbi Chaya and the son-in-law of Rabbi Yanai. So he's married to Rabbi Yanai's daughter, and he went to study in the Bet Midrash. And he would come home every Friday evening, which in other words, he's following the letter of the law, with, the regular law, not with permission, not without permission. He's following the full onah, that even if he was home the whole time, that's what he would have to do. So Yehuda looks like he's good, taking care of his wife very nicely. When he would come, he would be, Rabbi Yanai would see a pillar of fire preceding him. In other words, he is either his holiness or a symbol of his desire, of Yehuda's desire for his wife, that it looked like a pillar of fire coming in front of him. Okay, think of Bnei Israel in the desert, pillar of fire, and so on. But one Friday afternoon, Yehuda's learning pulled him away, and he was engrossed in his study, and he forgot to come home. So Rabbi Yanai, who was looking out the window, waiting for him to come, interestingly, not the wife, but Rabbi Yanai himself, has said, he must be dead. Turn over the beds, right? That's what, when they were in mourning back then, they would have the custom of turn over the beds. So he says, turn over his bed, because if he were alive, if Yehuda were alive, he would not miss the onah. My son-in-law is so diligent, so responsible, that the only way he could not be here is if he had died. Now, in fact, he was not dead. He was just learning Torah. But this is like, as Kohelet says, like an error that comes from a ruler. Sometimes if a king makes a decree, even if it's he's off with his head, or whatever he says, even if it's based on a mistake, but once he says it, it's enacted. And so too, Rabbi Yanai, once he said that Yehuda is dead, he actually died. So it was not the cause of him not being present, but it was the result of him missing the onah. Okay, in this case, interestingly, even though he came home once a week, more often, but still, it's about the expectation that one sets up, right? If you're going to be late, you better call home, so that it's really about the wife's feelings that he did not take into account. Okay, third story. Rabbi Yasak Rabbi Chaya. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi arranged for his son to marry the Rabbi Chaya's daughter. They came together to negotiate and write the Ketubot, and this young girl died. So why'd she die? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the father of the groom, said maybe there's some disqualification, something wrong with the families, with the ancestry, and so from heaven prevented this marriage from taking place. So they took out the family trees and checked, and they found Rabbi Mishifatya ben Abital, Rabbi Chaya Mishimai Achi David. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, he came from the Davidic line, and he was a descendant of David, King David's wife Avital, and his son Shefatya, all the way down to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Whereas Rabbi Chaya also was from very good lineage, but from Shimei, David's brother. So he was not David's descendant, but rather King David's nephew, great nephew, which is not as good. And so, even though he had good lineage, not as good as Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, so this marriage was destined not to happen. Okay, this story just reflects the emphasis on lineage that was often common in the ancient world, especially in Persian society. Azeli asak libre be Rabbi Yosef ben Zimra. So now that marriage didn't work out, Rabbi goes and marries off his son to the daughter of Rabbi Yosef ben Zimra, who was a Kohen. So this was proper lineage. Paskule tarte sere shenin lemezal bebedhav. So while they're discussing the arrangement, they agreed that he's going to go study for 12 years. It might seem like a long time, but we're going to see this number come up often. 12 is also a number that means quite a lot. Others say it would be 2 years for each of the Sedarim of Shas. Okay, but you need long, continuous time to go and study, right? Even if you have 12 years, but you live at home, it's not the same being interrupted all the time as going and having uninterrupted 12 years of study. He's going to be in the Bet Midrash. All right, so they're sitting there and they're still, discussing the terms. Achlefuha kameh. And then the girl's family, they had her pass in front of him. She brought in a tray of tea or something, and they didn't go out on dates before that, and so the young man sees his future bride and he can't wait. Amar lehu neve shit. Can't we make it 6 years? I can't wait 12 years to marry her. So they say, all right, fine, we'll make it 6 years. Achlivu kameh. Then she passes by again. She brings in, brings in crackers. Amar lehu ichnis v'hadar ezil. And so he said to his father, you know what? How about we get married first, and only then I'll go to study Torah. I can't wait 12 years. They wanted to make the Kiddushin now, and then 12 years later, he'll come and they'll actually get married. He says, I won't be able to wait that long. I want to get married now. And then I'll still go. And so the son was embarrassed from his father. Right? The father was expecting his son to be a great sage and go and study for 12 years. Now he made it 6 years. Now he's going to get married first, not be completely devoted and have his full attention on Torah. So the son was embarrassed that he is showing his physical desire for his future wife more than Torah. Amar le beni dat koncha yesh becha. The father, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, said, don't feel bad, my son. You are just like your creator. Where do we see that God also has feel similarly? And the beginning in Az Yashir, Hashem says, Tibi emo, I will bring them into the land of Israel, v'tita emo, and then I will plant them. In other words, Hashem's original intention was that they would first enter into Eretz Yisrael, and only then build a Bet HaMikdash. So building Bet HaMikdash, that's like a home that they build together. That would be equivalent to Nisu'in. So first you have a journey, and then build the Bet HaMikdash, actually get married. But did that what happened? No. Ulbasof ketiv asu l'mikdash v'shachanti betocham. In the end, Hashem says, all right, I changed my mind. And you know what? Make me a Mikdash here, out in the desert, and I will dwell among you, and only then we will travel on the way. So this is resolving a contradiction between these two Pesukim of the order of events, and so we resolve it by saying, originally, ideally, it would have been better to first travel and then build a Bet HaMikdash in Israel, but Hashem couldn't wait. He loved Bnei Israel so much, he couldn't wait to have a place to dwell amongst them, and so he did that first. So too, the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi's son was supposed to first travel away and only then get married, but he loved his bride too much, and so wanted to get married first. Good. Azil yateb terte sere shene beberav. So he went after his wedding, and he studied for 12 years since he got married first. So he made it back to 12 instead of 6. Adata ye'akara debitu. But by the time he came back, sadly, his wife was not fertile anymore. 12 years later. Amar Rabbi hechin abid negasha. So the father of the groom, Rabbi, said, what should we do? I want my son to have children, so he's going to have to marry another. So should he divorce his wife? What will people say? This poor woman, she waited 12 years for nothing. She waited 12 years for him, and now he comes back and divorces her? Ninsib iteta achariti yomiru zo ishto vezo zonato. Should he marry a second wife? And then what people will say, oh, the second wife, the one that's bearing children, that's his wife. The other one is his zonah, his mistress. That's be demeaning for her, and that's not right either. So what do we do? So they pleaded for mercy, they prayed to God, and she was cured. So this has a happy ending. And in this case, this boy, groom, he showed his care and love for his wife. But the circumstances were such that he went to study Torah. And sometimes it's just inevitable. You wait so long, and it could be negative. But because he was thinking about her, and does show his desire for her, so it ends up well. Okay, fourth story. Rabbi Hananya ben Chachinai hava ka'azir lebe Rab b'shilhei hiluleh te Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. So Rabbi Hananya ben Chachinai, remember his father's name is Chachinai. He went to study in the Bet Midrash. He went to study for a long time at the end of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai's wedding. Amali akabli adate behadach. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai says, can't you wait for me, and I will go to the Bet Midrash with you. In other words, wait till the Sheva Berachot, wait for a few more days, till we end all the Sheva Berachot, over the course of the wedding celebrations that are the next nights, and I'll come with you. But Rabbi Hananya was anxious to go study and didn't wait for him. This shows something of his personality, that he was impatient and wanted to go study Torah and rather than wait for a friend. Azal yeteb and he went and studied for 12 years in the study hall. In the meantime, the city paths had changed, right? Different paths moved, different homes were built. He didn't recognize the streets and the landmarks, and he didn't know how to get back to his own home. He was married also, and he didn't know how to get back home. So he sat on the bank of the river, waiting to find someone who maybe would know where he lives. He heard someone calling, people calling, saying, daughter of Chachinai. Now Chachinai, that's his father's name. Chachinai is the grandfather. This girl is his daughter. So that's they're calling him by the daughter of the grandfather, presumably because Rabbi Hanina was absent. He got married and he had a child, and maybe when the child was an infant, he left. And so now they're coming back, and she's 12 years old, right? Makes sense. Calls her Rebita, a young girl. And so since the father wasn't around, so she was brought up by the grandfather. So they're calling her Bat Chachinai, right? Go and fill up your pitcher and let's go. Amar Shema Mina, Hai Rebita Didan. So Rabbi Hananya sitting there says, oh, I can conclude that this girl is ours, meaning it's his daughter. I like how he's using halachic terminology, like after a long, proof from different pisukim, you say Shema Mina. So here he's so engrossed in his study, he's still thinking even of the regular world as a kind of sugya, as he comes to the logical conclusion. QED, this is my daughter. Azal batra havak yetiba debituka nahala kimha. So he followed her to, she's going home, so he followed her to find his house. His wife was sitting and sifting flour. Dalena chazite, she lifted her eyes from sifting and sees him, Rabbi Chanina. Saveli ba parach. Her heart understood her. Took her second for a mind to realize that it was her husband who surprised her after 12 years of being away, and her soul left her. She fainted. She died from surprise. So Rabbi Hananya prayed and said, this poor woman, that she waited so long, this is her reward, that she died now. So he prayed and she came back to life. Okay, another positive story. Because he went with permission, and she didn't do anything to deserve that. So it ends on a happy note. If you could point out here, this the series of 7 comes in pairs of 2. I'll just show the first 4 so far that we read. You see the similar language. The first 2 he comes on a regular basis, either once a year or Yom Kippur, but he messed up and didn't come one time, and he dies in the end. The same as in the second story. Here he was supposed to come every week, but his learning pulled him, and he died at the end. So the first 2 are about sages that even though they're coming relatively often, more often than 12 years, every 1 year, every 1 week, but they miss the expectation. So psychologically, it's still worse, and the husband dies in both these cases, and that's the end of the story. So these are the most negative cases. The next 2 is they're not violating an expectation. They said we're going away for 12 years, and so they go away for 12 years. So even though it's longer, but they're doing it in a proper way, and they feel bad about their wives when they come home and their wife either is barren or their wife died. And so in both of these cases, they pray and the wife gets better. So these are, they're better cases. I don't know if we would learn from them. Can you pray for a miracle that would happen every time? So these are warning cases. They have a better outcome, but may not be able to rely on these precedents because not everyone is going to have the merit to be revived. Okay, and from there we go to the 5th story. Rabbi Chama bar Bisa Azel Yatib B'tere Sere Shene Bebe Midrash. Rabbi Chama went and studied for 12 years. Like the others, he learned his lesson. When I come back, I'm not going to surprise my wife like Ben Chachinai did, and she passed out from surprise. I'm going to come home and tell my wife gently that I'm home. So he didn't come straight to his home. He went to the Bet Midrash first. It's a nice transition point from the faraway Bet Midrash to the local Bet Midrash before he goes home. And he sent a messenger to his house to say that he's back in town. While he's waiting in the Bet Midrash, Rabbi Oshaya, Rabbi Chama's son, comes, Yatev Kameh, and he's sitting before him. He didn't recognize that this is his son because he went away for 12 years, so now the son is, might be 13, 14 years old. Hava kamashil le shema'ata, and Rabbi Oshaya is asking questions about halacha. He's sitting before him. Rabbi Chama is an elder sage, and so Rabbi Oshaya is looking up to him and asking him questions, learning from him. Rabbi Chama saw this young student is very sharp. Rabbi Chama got depressed. If only I was home, I could have sat and taught my son, and I would have a son that's impressive like this, Rabbi Oshaya. Again, not knowing that actually that was his son, who was taught by somebody else, his grandfather. So in the end, Rabbi Chama, right after the messenger went there, he went to his home. Al bere kam kameh. So he went to his house, and the son was with him. Rabbi Chama, when he saw his own son, Rabbi Oshaya, walk in, Rabbi Chama, the father, stood up for Rabbi Oshaya because he studied with him. He still didn't know it was his son. This is the kid that was with him in the Bet Midrash. So Rabbi Chama walks in first. He sits down, and then a minute later, Rabbi Oshaya was following, walks in. Rabbi Chama stands up for this Torah sage, even though he's much younger, but he showed his acumen. So he stands up for him. So Rabbi Chama said, I guess he followed me here because he wants to discuss more Torah with me. And so that's why he came in. So he's standing up to greet him. But the wife looks at this and says, does a father ever stand up for a son? It doesn't make any sense. It would make sense if the student was coming to learn, so he wants to come and greet him, or because he treats him as a sage in of himself and wants to stand up. But if knowing that's his son, a father doesn't stand up for his son, so the wife is surprised. So this is a very happy ending, that sure enough, he was depressed that he went away for so long and didn't teach his son. He could have had a son like this, but turns out it was his son. And the reason why everything turned out well is because his grandfather taught him. So Rabbi Bar Chama said about them that a threefold cord will not be quickly broken. If you have a rope that's made of 3-ply, it'll be very strong. And this refers to when you have 3 generations of sages. This is Rabbi Oshaya, the son of Rabbi Hama, who's the son of Bisa. So because they had Torah in their family, and even though, or because Rabbi Hama went away for a long time to study, in that merit, the son was also able to become a Torah scholar in his own right. And so here, everything worked out well. And one that seems the reason is because Rabbi Chama is very sensitive to his wife, even though, he went away for 12 years, but with permission, they agreed to this beforehand. And you see his sensitivity in saying, I'm not going to do what Rabbi Chanina did, but I'm going to come home and send a messenger, send a Bet Midrash, make sure that my wife will be okay. So because of his understanding and sensitivity, that's why this story ends well. We'll continue with the 6th and 7th story on the next daf. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.